Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Snapchat wants you to vote and everything voting. That's our episode for today. We've got a lot of different things to discuss when it comes to voting, how technology's helping it, maybe how technology's hurting it, polls and how to use them, and voter myths. So we're going to blast through a bunch of stuff today. Lance has been so excited that he almost can't contain his enthusiasm. And, well, why do you care? That's an awesome question. Your vote obviously affects your life. And we'll explain exactly how that works, particularly at the midterms. And to kick things off, we'll start with none other than
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Yeah, I was just finishing up the crossword puzzle from the Wall Street Journal from Monday, October 22nd. And when I pulled it out, I looked at one of your favorite things, Justin, and that is a chart that talks about the rising interest in this year's midterm. And it's surging among all groups. So yeah, I'm excited. Men are actually 1, 2, 3, 4. They are actually other than ages 18 to 34, men are the lowest interest group from this poll taken October 2018, comparing the interest among men, women, Democrat, Republicans, white, black, Hispanic, ages 18 to 34, ages 65 and older, between October 2010, October 2014, and October 2018. So the last three midterm elections, right? If I'm thinking quickly here off my feet, because I just have to look at this, and men have the lowest interest of all of those groups except for ages 18 to 34. Kind of would not have thought that.
Yeah, a little fun tidbit there to turn some common beliefs upside down. So we're going to look at, first up is going to be Snapchat. But before we get into that, because we do try to answer that question, why do you care? I said your vote affects your life. And especially, we've said this before, at the local level, a lot of these issues that you are going to get to vote on aren't even necessarily candidates. Mm-hmm. Tax increases, school levies, all kinds of things. Fire, EMTs, depending on where you live, it's all going to be different. And it's all things that typically do have an immediate and direct effect on your life. So even if you don't know what's happening, or you don't want to go vote for Congress, or whatever, you should go vote just for the sake of, you can take a nonpartisan ballot, and you don't have to vote for anybody other than at least go vote on the issues that are going to affect your life. At least exercise that portion of it. That'd be my thinking there, Lance.
The bare minimum, huh?
Yeah, the bare minimum. Go vote on those. Because a lot of those things can be decided. I mean, we saw it here locally in our own community with several of the school levies that were attempted, where it was a margin of very few votes. We can be talking about hundreds. Sometimes we're talking about less than that. Sometimes we're talking about 10 votes or something like that make the difference. So.
And many states have early voting. So right now people are voting. So if you're
a record number of early voters too.
If your issue is that you don't have time in your busy day, you can go take care of it now. Find a time, call your local board of elections. And if you live in one of those states or areas that has early voting, take advantage of it, or grab an absentee ballot, get online and get on your phone and just order an absentee ballot. I mean, I've had 3 or 4 mailings asking me, here's how, not asking me, but saying, hey, if you can't get to the polls at all or can't even early vote, here's the way they actually sent me a form. First time that's ever happened.
Yep.
I got a form for an absentee ballot.
I think it was a state of Ohio thing.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Where they sent them out and said, here is what you need to get your absentee ballot. I mean, it can only get to an extent. At some point, it only becomes so easy to, if you're registered, and that's a different discussion, it can be pretty darn easy to vote. So definitely get her done. Snapchat is just one of several big tech and social media companies that is urging people to register to vote. Snapchat, which is popular among teenagers and young adults, pushed people 18 and over to register by adding a button about doing so on each user's profile, according to the New York Times. The company also sent video messages to all of those users, urging them to register. It directed those users to a nonpartisan voter registration website, turbovote.org. So if you're not registered, you can go there. And TurboVote is kind of like what Lance and I have talked about, the website contactingcongress.org, which is basically just a gateway website. So what TurboVote does is it lets you put in your info and then it directs you to the exact place you need to go to fill out the registration. Typically that process, if you have everything you need, 5 minutes or less, in my experience. I've registered personally a lot of people to vote via paper registration. I did for the 2016 election. And those forms, 5 minutes is generous. It probably, if you're fast writer and reader, maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah. You don't have to do much other than put in your name and address and sign your name.
Yep.
That's it.
It's me.
It's real simple.
I'm registered. Yep. So Snapchat, the big news here though was that it appears that Snapchat had an even bigger effect, getting 418,000 people to register. Of that total, 79,000 in Texas, 29,000 in Florida, 22,000 in Georgia, and almost 18,000 in Ohio. All of those states have competitive races, and several of those are, important swing states that we look to. And those are, I think, respectable numbers of, for a company that doesn't have, or at least they'll tell you they don't have a specific political agenda. That's a lot of people to get registered. So what do you think, Lance, of this push, just using Snapchat as the example, of getting people to register to vote? Facebook did something too. They put out a campaign that you could share with your friends that said, hey, register to vote. It's your country and your voice matters kind of thing.
Well, and again, in this same issue of the Wall Street Journal, here it is. Look at the headline there. College.
Yep.
Sorry. So U.S. colleges compete to lift low student voting rates, and they're going to make it into a competition. Harvard and Yale are playing each other in football, and they have a contest going about how many students, what percentage of their student bodies will register to vote. And they're trying to get the president of the losing school to wear the other team's jersey at the annual Harvard-Yale football game. So, and then they talk about it in the Big 12 conference, which was Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Iowa. The Big 10, which is going to crown two schools, one for the highest voter turnout and one for the most improved. And SoCon votes, which is the Southern Conference, not the SEC, but the Southern Conference, which is 10 schools from North Carolina to Alabama. So it sounds to me, and again, it says about 15,000 students have taken steps to register to vote by creating accounts on TurboVote, a website provided. Yep. So it goes right in line with what you're saying with Snapchat. So it seems to be a big push out there to get the 18 to 24-year-olds to vote. And again, whether it's Taylor Swift or Google or however you have to get them, you need to get them out there to vote. I'm not silly enough to not understand that times are changing. So you need to use the technology of the people to get them out to vote. So if young people are using these devices or using these apps, then why not go after them as a way to register them to vote? Because notice they're not trying to register Democrats or Republicans or independents. They're just trying to register people, and then that's the whole point. Is there's no political push here. And I know there's some people out there going to say, well, yes, there is, because you're going, I don't know. I taught on a college campus 2 of the last 3 years, and part of it is where we are. Sure. But it was the most conservative college campus I remember being on in the last 30 years. It just really was. And it happened to be during the 2016 election, and there were more programs to attend for the Trump voters on campus than there were for the Hillary voters, which really shocked me. But it was kind of interesting because I had the kids in my class. I was teaching history classes. So I think it's cool. I think it's a great idea, and go get them. The more people that vote, the less we have to complain about. I mean, because then the people are speaking. And
we can't do things where we say, well, only of people eligible to register, only 40% of them voted. So did the people really speak? Because you hear a lot of polls at different times saying among registered voters, this is how they feel. The important thing, though, to note is that doesn't mean that's how America feels. It means the people who vote.
Right.
That's how they feel. And so, I mean, in turn, you could say, well, that is how America feels because everybody else doesn't care enough to get it done. Now, we're going to talk about voter myths here in a little bit. So stay tuned if you're getting riled up on us, if we've got any of you Bernie bros out there who are like, wow, it's too hard to register to vote. We'll
here's
talk
something,
about that. But
a Tufts University poll found that 48%, almost half of all college students voted in the 2016 presidential election. By contrast, only 18% voted in the 2014 midterms. By contrast, 67% of people ages 45 to 64, hey, that's me, voted in 2016.
Hey.
So even though we go, it's like wild, like, wow, 48%, almost half of all college students voted. Well, people within my demographic, 45 to 64, were at 67%. So they still trailed by almost 30%.
Yeah.
College students did. So
it can be improved.
It's a good thing. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, and you can't vote
until we get to
100%.
Right.
Right.
It can always be better.
Well, the only way you're going to do that is if you become different. Well, don't get me down that road.
Yeah, I know.
We don't want a totalitarian country where you're forced to vote.
But that's my point. There organizations like turbovote.org, vote.org, all of those are going to continue to exist as long as we don't have everybody who can vote voting. And obviously it can be way better than it is. I mean, if we had I just wonder how things would be different if 80% of eligible voters voted. How would that change things? I don't know, but it would be interesting to see because there's a lot of people who aren't speaking who have the right to speak.
What's interesting is you picked that number 80% in this graph of the rising interest of this year's midterms. No group is 80%.
Yep.
The highest group that has an interest is between 70 and 75.
But I bet if you took
and it's Democrats, Republicans, Hispanic, and ages 65 and older. They barely are over the 70% of them that were polled have an interest in voting this year. So there's not even, you want 80% of the people to vote. There's not even 80% of the people that are interested in voting, according to this poll. I mean, we're just talking about an interest.
Yeah, we got an uphill battle.
I mean, I'm really interested, but I didn't make it,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's kind of the other point then too of the people that are registered, how many of them actually go out to vote, which is the thing we run into. It's like a whole other campaign. Well, you're registered, but you didn't go vote.
Right.
I can think of a few people that I know who I know are registered because I registered their hind ends.
Yes.
And I don't know if they're going to vote,
right.
Well, I didn't really have time or, I didn't really, I didn't know what was on the ballot.
I don't know what's on the issues.
Hey, by the way, if you don't know what's on the ballot, it's super easy to do. I don't remember the website offhand, but Brett and I used it during the primaries this year. And if you Google what's on my ballot, there's a website and it might be called what'sonmyballot.com or something. And it's really nice because what it does is you enter, your address and it says, okay, here's who you will be voting on and the issues you'll be voting for. And they actually reach out to pretty much all candidates and they ask them 3 or 4 of the same questions and they put their answers right next to each other. And then they even let you select who you want to vote for. And then at the end, once you've gone through the whole list, it prints out a sheet and it tells you, okay, you take this into the ballot box and you'll be done in 30 seconds. Just bubble in according to your printout here. I mean, at some point, Lance, it's not.
It's like those books,
it's
right?
Not that complicated.
Building a Computer for Dummies, American History for Dummies, Voting for Dummies.
Yep.
I mean, I've never had to write out who I was going to vote for. I could kind of read the ballot, but I guess in an age where we're not teaching people to read, then I guess you might need that.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and it's not.
I shouldn't blast people. Hey, if you're voting, I'm all for you. So, notice I said, if you're voting, I don't care who you vote for.
Yeah.
Just use your, take advantage of your of your fought for right. So it's amazing. Now I'm going to digress for just a second. I'm standing in line to get my blood pressure medicine today, right?
Uh-huh.
And these old people were talking about the flag and patriotism and really cracking down on the, wow, these NFL players and how much money they make and respect the flag, rah, rah, rah. And I'm sure because of the numbers, they'll probably vote. But I want to say, yeah, well, how many of you voted? Because all those people that you talked about that died for the flag, they died for you to have the right to vote. And how many of you were going to vote? And do you realize that people died for the flag, for the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech? And so it's not disrespect, not to get into the flag issue and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, people, advance it one step further. Are you going to follow through and vote? No, because it was all us old people who are retired. I was the youngest person, at 57, I was the youngest person in line getting all their medicine. But still, I'm smiling and being nice to letting all these 70-year-olds, get their medicines.
The quote unquote old
and
people.
listening to them. Right. I mean, it's all relative, but, yeah.
Huh. It's definitely one of those.
It's like, do you vote? I mean,
Right.
you want to be patriotic. You want to be, you want to stand for the flag. Okay. Do you vote?
Yeah.
I'm saying that to everybody.
Yep.
You don't have to be old.
And if you do, great.
Well, I'm patriotic.
Okay.
I stand up for the flag. Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Vote.
Yeah. That's more patriotic.
That's even more patriotic than anything else you can be upset about.
Yep.
Okay. That's my rant for the day.
Standing up is awesome, but that's more of at least the way that
Other than the drugstore needs to hire more people so it doesn't take 20 minutes
so
for
long
me
to
to
get everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's the third time I've been in to pick up this prescription. And I finally just decided, I needed the prescription, right? Because I waited over 20 minutes 2 times earlier and just left because I still wasn't at the front of the line.
waiting.
Right. I mean, how hard is it?
They need like a fast lane, like those ones where you got 20 items or less.
Well, then they even alphabetize and the people working can't find. It's like, there's the basket that's got the J's in it.
I can see it from
It's
here.
right there.
Just give it to me.
I don't know why you're looking on this shelf over here. There's nothing with the letter J in that shelf. Oh my goodness
You gotta
gracious.
check just to be safe.
Wow. No, they got to scan it first before they give it to you, even after they read it.
Yep. Bleep.
Sorry, I didn't have anything to do with voting.
No. Anyway, I was just reflecting on
Be patriotic, vote.
the way that I learned it is because you talk about patriotism. I think it's a big word. Respect is standing for the flag during, the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance or something like that. Patriotism is being an active part of your democracy, and standing for the flag is not necessarily part of that.
Exactly.
That's not really an active part of democracy. That is it for most people. It is or I think it should be you're respecting those who died, not defending the flag, per se, defending what the flag stands for. That should be why you stand. And if you choose not to stand, then it should be because you're exercising as an active part of democracy, your right to protest, So that's, just a different take on let's separate a little bit here what should qualify as patriotism.
And what does the song have to do with the flag?
Right.
Because the song didn't become the national anthem until the 20th century.
Yes.
And it's got 4 verses.
Yep.
And why do we play it at sporting events?
By the way,
what does it have to do with sporting events?
For those of you who aren't familiar with the other verses, you should look them up because it's really a beautiful poem.
It's a nice story.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
horribly written song, and it's awful to try to sing.
It's not supposed to be. Anyway, well, sorry, we'll get off. We'll get off. And it's the reason they chose the verse they did is because it's the quote unquote easiest one to sing. And
it's the first.
It's not easy.
That's why they chose it. It's the first. Yes.
I don't know. You read the rest of that and trying to sing any of the other parts. Ooh, it's because it's really more of a poem than it is. It's not really a song per se. But okay, voting. So Snapchat, yay, technology. So can Lance officially seeds here, right, that this is a positive of technology, getting more young people to register?
As long as they don't turn it into where I shop and where I go and all that kind of stuff.
I know, you had to think about it there.
As long as it's not an information gathering tool.
There's a caveat.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to look at next.
On the surface, it appears like a good thing.
We're going to look at next. I tell you what. Straight answers are few and far between from Lance Jackson in the.
I guarantee you, I won't give you a
7
straight
years.
answer. That's a straight answer.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, I won't give you a straight answer.
Hey, November. Let's see. It'll be right after Thanksgiving. So like the 27th or 8th or something like that. That will be the 7-year anniversary of True Chat. So that's kind of exciting. Another year down. But we're going to look at polls next and how to use them, because you're probably hearing a lot about polls this time of year, what all these different polls are saying and what does it mean, right? Because the 2016 election, everybody railed against, oh, they got it so wrong and all this and that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, the reason Lance and I are taking time to talk about this is because the State of Us as a podcast is dedicated to covering those issues which the mainstream media either is not giving enough attention to or not giving the right kind of attention to. And in this case, I'd probably say it's a little bit of both. Looking at the larger purpose of True Chat, what all of our podcasts pursue, which is a common goal to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations, which is protected by our First Amendment rights. So if you think that we are not doing a good job of upholding those standards, we encourage you to be an active part of this community at True Chat by emailing ethics@truechat.org. Keep us accountable. The people keep the media accountable. We'll keep the politicians accountable. It'll all work great. That was the thinking anyway. So Lance, how to use polls. I think this is an important one. I'm glad we found this the other day. And it is from the Wall Street Journal. So if you guys want to look it up, it's actually titled "To Trust Polls, Dig Deeper into the Results." So you can Google that with Wall Street Journal. It'll come up there. And it talks a little bit about, as the fall campaigns unfold, remember that neither a candidate's polling percentage nor any other single number will give you the full picture. And by the way, this is written by a pollster, just for everybody's information. Instead,
which is what I thought made it really cool.
Yeah, I think, it's good to hear from the people that do this for a living. Instead, look for thoughtful surveys that delve into what Americans feel as they do. And that's always been a better indicator, right? Not so much, do you like this person? Do you like this person? But polls can give us insight into the beliefs and ideals of what people care about. And they do a much better job typically at polling an interest in something, like this interest in the, well, just because 70% of people are interested doesn't mean that 70% of people are going to vote, kind of thing. As the contest tightened in the closing weeks of 2016, there were historic levels of dislike for both candidates, which infused the campaigns with uncertainty. Trump won very high percentages of late deciders, while many less enthusiastic Democrats ultimately stayed home. These are the kinds of things that are accounted for typically in a margin of error, but even the best margin of error never is going to be able to perfectly predict that kind of thing. These are predictions, which by their nature can be wrong, But again, one thing in 2016 doesn't mean that we discount everything from then on and say, well, we can't trust any of it ever. No, as history tells us, it's been an accurate predictor for many years of how things will go. But Congress is won locally, seat by seat. So instead, watch the polls targeting the competitive districts that will really decide the House.
Yep. You can't look at the national poll and say, they say 57% of the country want Democrats to run the House of Representatives, because that doesn't tell us anything, because there are 435 individual races across the country, and you have to look at each one of those and see what the margins are and what the margin of error is in each one of those races to see what could happen in the House. Yeah,
it's about who comes out with the majority of that 435, not the people as a whole. And again, whether or not you like that, you have a voice and a way to change it. Contactingcongress.org. If you think the way that the way that you're represented is not good, it can be changed. I know that's hard to imagine, but
not to digress. That's why the governor's races in these states are so important, because people who are going to be elected governor this year in these states are going to be the ones who get to help realign the districts based on the 2020 census.
So super important.
I mean, I know we've been talking about local elections, being important in local issues, and all politics are local. But then we talked a little bit here. I just mentioned the House. But if your state has a governor's race, that's huge in changing district lines, which create these 435 House districts.
We got really fortunate for those of you in Ohio, and for in other states. It's important that you know that Ohio got something big done. Again, one of those things the mainstream media, I feel like, didn't do a very good job of covering. During the primary election season, Ohio strongly voted yes for a new law in our state that requires, for when the districts are going to be redrawn, that it be done so by a bipartisan, equally stacked committee. Is that exactly perfect to avoid stuff? No, of course not. But it's a huge step in the right direction. Other states need to take those same kind of moves. I know the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had that ruling recently that caused a number of things to get redrawn. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that
and we covered that.
Yeah. That the Supreme Court will rule on it at some point. But in the meantime, you can push for your states to do it. Exercise your rights of, and when I say local, I just want people to know too, I am also talking about states. I know that gets a little confusing because it's not as local as obviously your city or your county level. But it's still one of those things where you have proportionally a much larger direct impact on how legislation is going to be done. And you can probably get a meeting with your local state representative to speak with them specifically if you try. Because most of those people, they have full-time jobs doing other things. That's not their primary only line of work. So watch how much weight voters give to the economy in their decisions. Lance said this a couple weeks ago. Most say it's good and that normally favors the party in power. But other issues like immigration can spur far more division if they come to the forefront. Democrats' fortunes still hinge on turning out people who don't typically vote in midterms. There's a lot that goes into polls. I hope that's part of what this is highlighting. And I just like this last part here, Lance, that I wanted to make sure to share. We pollsters are used to healthy public skepticism about where we get all these numbers, even though long-term studies show they've generally maintained their accuracy. People suspect, correctly, that their fellow Americans have gotten harder for us to find and talk to. It does take more work and care for us to get a good read on what's happening in a fast-changing country. But good pollsters innovate as technology changes, and we've never had more ways to talk to people than we do now. Pollsters once just knocked on doors, then started making random telephone calls, then moved from landlines to calling mostly cell phones because that's what people use. After Americans got connected online, we moved interviews there to follow suit. Big data lets us dive deeper into the vote patterns than ever before. The question is what we do with all the information. And that's another thing to look at.
That's excellent.
I just thought that's, this year, demand more from us pollsters. Don't judge us simply by whether we can predict the world. Judge us by whether we can explain it. And that goes back to what I said at the beginning, right? The purpose of polls should be an indication to what people are feeling, because they're incredibly accurate when it comes to that. Much less so in saying, because people feel X, they'll do Y. That's where it gets murkier. People are not rational beings most of the time. So keep in mind, just because they feel a certain way and it's, well, logically, they would then do this, that doesn't mean that's what they always do. They can always change that stuff. Any other thoughts here, Lance, on polls that you want to share with people before we talk about a couple myths of voters?
No, I mean, I think one thing that makes it tougher for the polls now are all the early voters. But your early voters tend to already know how they feel. But like it said there about the 2016 presidential election, a lot of the undecideds that waited went for Trump. And I think there's still those undecideds out there that now, just under 2 weeks until the election, are still, they're waiting for their minds to be changed. What big event is going to make them flip one direction or the other? So I think that makes it really hard on the pollsters. That's why people say, oh, they weren't right. Well, there are a lot of people out there that are undecided on these issues. And with the instant news media and the internet and how the news gets to us so quickly these days, things are going to change late. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I do like hearing from someone who makes that their career and telling us what to watch for and what to listen to. So
we'll end with a few different myths of the lazy non-voter. And this is from the New York Times, Sunday, October 7th. So if you Google the myth of the lazy non-voter, NYT, you'll be able to pull up this article. Or if you're like Lance and I and keep these paper archives of the paper, you can just go back to October 7th in the review section. So if history is an indicator of anything, only around 40% of eligible voters will vote in the midterm elections. Most people assume that voter turnout remains this low because Americans are apathetic and simply don't want to vote. But it's actually more likely that Americans do want to vote, and one of the root causes of low turnout is the country's framework of restrictive voting laws. Despite the challenges that exist today, the solutions to low turnout are not mysterious. In fact, they're right in front of us. Just as some states that have passed laws restricting access to voting in recent years have seen reduced turnout, some states with laws that afford people the greatest access to voting have experienced high participation. Voters must choose elected officials and not the other way around. So, no ID voters. So if you don't have a form of ID that shows name and address, but who have voted at least once before in their state, first-time voters without an ID face especially daunting barriers. There are 23 states in which you could not vote. There are 28 in which you could, a majority of which are naturally Democratic states are the ones that share that 28. Could vote, a majority of them are Democratic held. Working parent voters. Many voters face considerable obstacles in getting to the polls because they are parents with full-time jobs who cannot afford to take unpaid time off work to vote. Less than half of the states require employers to pay employees for time off to vote on election day. This one I'm not quite as sympathetic to. I know we got to wrap up here, Lance, but you and I have talked a lot about there's a lot of ways to vote, whether it's early or everybody has absentee voting. So you have that choice. You don't have to wait in line to vote. Right. Maybe you like to.
And you can request absentee ballots, at least in our state, I would think in almost every state, online. Yes. So it's not like it's then it's mailed to you, and then you can do it when it's convenient for you, and then just drop it in the mail.
Yep.
There really are no excuses about work or whatever.
Yeah.
Or having children or all that kind of stuff. There are so many ways around it if you really want to do it.
Voter registration deadlines are ones that can catch would-be voters by surprise. Here we look at voters who have the required ID to actually register, but put off getting registered until just 3 days before the election. Only a few states actually allow late or in-person same-day voter registration. So if you're one of those people that says, hey, I want to vote this year, and you didn't really know that, you got to be registered, weeks in advance, and in some states even further in advance than that. There are 34 states in which you cannot vote if you didn't get registered before their deadline.
But then still go ahead and register now.
Yes.
So then you're ready for you're ready for the next one.
If you show up at the polls and they say you can't vote because you're not registered, ask them to register. They'll give you the stuff to register.
Because once you register it counts.
Yeah. So 17 states you could vote. Eager student voters. A smaller portion of students have a driver's license today than in the 1980s. This is important. According to a study by the University of Michigan, those attending school out of state may not have the in-state ID that the law requires. Students are also less likely to have other forms of ID commonly required by state laws. Even among states that accept student IDs alone, there are sometimes restrictions that limit their use. In Wisconsin, for example, an eligible student ID must include a name, photo, signature, issue date, and expiration date, which I can tell you, having gone to a relatively expensive private school, mine did not have all that stuff on it. I had my photo and my name and my student ID number. It did not have an expiration date. There was no signature line. There was no issue date. And it had an enhanced security feature and a magnetic strip and all that, but it didn't have that other stuff. So 7 states you could not vote in, 44 that you could vote in. So that one's not as big a problem, but hey, you 7 states, let's get that. Texas is one of them, and that's and Arizona and Ohio. So, sorry. Now as I'm looking at those 7 states.
Those are the states that are known for voter suppression, not to get into a different category because we're trying to wrap up, but there are states that are famous in the last 5 years or infamous for their attempts to suppress voter turnout.
Yeah, but Ohio and Arizona especially, and Texas, Democrats have been looking at trying to get it flipped blue now for the last couple cycles. Those are all 3 big ones where
the only people who it's easier for, and I've just got to get this rim shot in, to vote in America's election are the Russians. They haven't figured out how to stop the Russians from voting in America's election.
Okay.
If you're a student, they can figure it out. If you haven't registered in time, but the Russians, they can influence our elections easier than anybody else. All right. That's the rim shot.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Just had to.
Heavy sarcasm there, folks, in case you didn't get it.
This is a big one. Convicted felon voters. Many Americans who have been convicted of a felony but are now out of prison or are on parole or on probation may want to vote, but many states have laws that expressly limit their voting rights. In the last 20 years, many states have made significant strides in changing the restrictive laws, recently expanded voting rights to people on probation or parole. A ballot measure in Florida this year called Amendment 4 would allow many felons to vote once they've completed their sentences. If passed, it could re-enfranchise 1.5 million citizens. So if you're on probation or on parole or are just a former felon, there are 30 states in which you cannot vote. Only 21 in which you can.
Yep.
This may be the biggest one of all these that drives me nuts. What does that say about our criminal justice system if we don't let people who have allegedly served their punishment vote again? That says that we're really not okay with them actually coming back into society. We're really not comfortable with how they might change our criminal justice system. And of course, they'd be the ones best qualified to change it since they've been there.
Especially when you have a number of non-violent felons.
Yes.
These days are on the increase.
So many that, that haven't done anything to physically injure another person. And they're not allowed to vote, after they're out of prison. I mean, we can debate the whole whether they should be able to vote when they're in prison thing, but it's just nuts to me. Their time has been served. Supposedly their punishment is over. Sorry. Go ahead. That's the one that gets me.
Speak.
More than any of those others.
Speak.
It's just, it's so upsetting.
Preach to the choir.
How are we going to change, how our criminal justice system works if the people who went through it can't vote? Ooh. Okay, so you guys want to vote, vote.org. And if that's too simple for you, turbovote.org. If you Google how to vote, you'll find it. So, or Bing it. I don't want to be biased just to Google. If any of you out there use Bing. And by the way, if you use Yahoo, I bet Lance didn't know this, you are using Bing because Bing is Microsoft's search engine and it's actually what Yahoo's been built on for like the past 5 or 6 years.
I knew Bing.
Mm-hmm. Bing.
I didn't know Yahoo was Bing, but I knew Bing.
Yeah. So if you think you're getting something different by going to Yahoo, you might as well just go to Bing because
I don't use it, but I know
pretty much the same thing. So, all right. Anyway, go vote. And if you haven't registered, get her done. And if you don't know who to vote for, Google what's on my ballot. You go to Google and I guarantee in 20 minutes or less, you'll have everything done that you needed and you'll know what the issues are.
One-stop shopping. Here we go.
Yep. Get her done.
As it pertains to voting.
Yep. Any last message, Lance?
Nope. Vote early, vote often.
That's what the Democrats say, right?
No. That's what the political machine said back in the day. Yep. I'm giving that historical perspective.
Vote early, vote often.
Vote early and vote often. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get President Trump to pay attention to me. to tweet about me.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere out there, somebody's got to be listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from the government.
Yep.
And if I say that, I just want to try to I want him to tweet about me and trying to shut me up and don't listen to me.
Yeah.
Because then that validates me with so many people.
Let us know your thoughts on voting and Lance. We want the comments on both of those things. And I'm not even going to ask a question. Just want your thoughts on Lance. Just share those thoughts. Let them flow. At TrueChat.org, Facebook, Twitter, and more. We'll see what you got to say. And of course, as always, you can find this podcast along with all other True Chat podcasts on a variety.
Spotify!
Yeah. Didn't even have to say it. He's got it now. Where else? Name one other.
Oh, man. I spent 3 months learning Spotify. On Twitter? YouTube?
YouTube. Yep.
Okay.
Twitter, you can
do
engage
podcasts?
with us there.
Oh, you can engage. Okay.
Yeah. You got one, YouTube.
I got YouTube and Spotify.
We don't typically mention that one, but you can.
What more do you want?
They go up on YouTube.
I can see the apps in my head, but I can't read them.
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts. Yeah. I like apple pie. But never mind. Sorry.
Stitcher.
Yeah. Stitcher. I should know Stitcher, right?
You should know iHeartRadio, because if you still listen to AM and FM, my guess is you've got at least one station that's owned by iHeartRadio.
I listen to XM radio.
You and me both. That's where it's at.
All the time. It's in all my vehicles.
Yep. Sirius XM. One of perhaps, in my opinion, the most illegal mergers that we've ever seen to form a monopoly. But hey,
it's got good stuff on the radio.
It's got good stuff. It's not hurting us too
bad.
For
me to listen to, right.
So,
and before we get off the air, just want to, out there in the worldwide internet, wish you a happy birthday.
Oh, good.
Right. Thanks. And don't eat too much tonight.
Oh, that's
all you've been talking about in the pre-show meeting.
I've been ready all day.
Is what you're going to eat tonight. So
I woke up
just
ready.
Don't eat too much. All right.
Hungry.
Enjoy, but don't eat too much.
Let's go now.
I mean, you're getting so old these days. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
I thought about getting you a walker for your birthday because you're so old.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in for the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio. I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The State of Us. Be the change.